recorded. Hello, everybody. It's Marilyn Harris here of the podcast series called Creating an Impactful Legacy. I started the podcast to help workplaces create an impactful legacy in their workplace through workplace wellness, kindness, cooperation, teamwork, all those yummy, juicy words for workplace. So today I have on my call with me is Stephanie Blair, and she's going to introduce herself in a second. But anyway, welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm Stephanie Blair, the CEO and founder of Know and Flourish. It's a strategic advisory and executive coaching firm.
Okay, great. So are you the chief engineer?
Chief executive, yeah. Main coach, all of the above.
Cook and bottle washer.
Correct.
Yeah, I think
you know it well.
Most of us are. That's why I say chief engineer. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I've met some engineers, and anyway, it's just like, okay, they think like I do, okay. And before, it's always like, that they're not, and they're somewhere else, their own playground somewhere. But anyway, never mind with them. So tell us a little bit about Stephanie. How did you get started doing what you're doing now?
Sure. Well, I launched Know and Flourish in early 2019, so I'm coming up on about a year in the business. And I did it to align my passion for helping high achievers unlock their potential and also high growth businesses to achieve sustainable growth. So for years, I worked alongside high growth companies going through digital transformations. And what I realized was there was so much focus on the tech side of things, but very often the people capital of resources and people as individuals was sort of forgotten. But the companies that aligned both really had something special. And, after years of grooming my own team of talent and peers, I realized that I have something special to offer in terms of helping folks unlock theirs, their unique proposition.
That's usually kind of how we get started what we're doing, right? Is we find problems somewhere and like, wait a minute, I can help fix this.
Exactly.
Solve it or whatever. So who are mostly your type of clients? Are they more for team building, or are they the CEOs themselves?
So I tend to work one level removed from the CEO themselves. It tends to be, line managers or practice leads, heads of customer success, CROs, heads of sales, heads of product, so folks that are often reporting into a CEO.
Right.
And I work either on an individual level for people who want to develop their leadership skills or change careers,
right.
Or the teams to sort of help with the communication so that they can, reduce the friction and get on their way to achieving results.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's a very interesting field to be in, and I'm glad you're one of the people that are leading that effort. So, what do you find that some of the things that your clients seem to face on a daily basis that you're able to help them with?
Sure. When we're thinking about the individual coaching client, they sometimes have trouble owning their careers or feeling their impact in an organization. And often the way that manifests itself is through things like burnout or high stress, or just feeling really lost in terms of their career choice and what am I doing? Right. Surely there needs to be a better way. And when it comes to teams, I see communication still being the big barrier, but sometimes it's about being in a silo and not really understanding the impact on the overall business, or just a lack of trust. And if you don't have trust, you really can't achieve anything because you're just sort of stuck in the muck.
Yeah, you're just kind of spinning the wheels in the mud.
Exactly. Which is not a fun place to be, and not a very productive or high growth place to be.
Right. So because you said you like to work with high growth companies, or that's sort of what I just got from what you just said. So what is your main thing that you're able to help them with? Your clients,
when you're looking,
like reducing the friction and things like that, but okay, so that's one way, but what are some other ways that you're able to help them with?
Well, I like to say that I work with modern leaders and modern organizations. And what that means to me is I see that there's a new playbook that needs to be written for success in this workplace, right? People have lives, they're connected 24/7. And if we don't redefine what it means to be productive and be a contributing team member, that leakiness factor that you see in terms of work and life can become all too overwhelming. So first and foremost, it's about making sure that the teams and the individuals are focused on the right goals that will actually be the most high value work objectives to then help them move things forward, and just to get alignment on that. I feel that so many times the issues are stemming from lack of alignment or lack of clarity. So to help just get folks on that same page, but also recognizing that we're all humans at the end of the day. So it's not just what we do, but how we do it. And we need to have mutual respect and, care and concern for our fellow workers.
Right.
And if we can do that, we can achieve greater results.
Right. I call that being kind to each other.
Exactly, which is why I was so pleased to be on your podcast.
It's not just being kind to each other, but we have to be kind to ourselves so that we show up at work productive and willing to go for it, right?
Right. And it's not only about being kind, but I think it's also about being vulnerable. I view that as one of the cornerstones to trust and to effective leadership. If you pretend, if you live under this cloak and you pretend you have it all right and you can do no wrong, it's really hard for your team to show up as their true selves because everybody's then posturing. And when you don't have your true finger on the pulse of what's going on in the culture, people then are operating from a place of fear as opposed to a place of trust or respect.
Right. Well, I guess those fears come from a lot of different things. It could be stuff that's going on in their lives personally, or it may be that they've just never been taught about good relationships, right?
Right. Well, you think about, again, like the old workbook, and you think about women who have, progressed into leadership roles specifically, right? There's that old queen bee syndrome where it's like, well, I had to wait 15 years to get to the top and I clawed my way up. So everybody else, get out of here. I finally arrived. You put your time in. And I think the more modern approach and the more effective approach is, hey, all ships rise, and what can we do together to create a flywheel effect in our organization to make big changes and big impacts.
Yeah. So do you find that there's a lot of division then between the male and the female? Like you were saying, queen bee now is usually known as the woman's, boss kind of essence, if you will. So do you think that there's one for the male side, or do you think, what's your take on those two?
Sure. Well, I work with both men and women and people who identify as all walks of life. But I do think in terms of a playbook and in terms of vulnerability, you do see it discussed, I think, more openly in women leadership communities. That said, I identify any modern organization as one where they have modern leaders who talk about these things. In fact, I'm part of a community of sales leaders and revenue leaders and marketing leaders, and some of the guys there were talking about imposter syndrome. And up until that moment a few months ago, I thought, hey, I thought only women really dealt with this. But obviously, anybody who's pushing themselves in high growth climates can face that quite regularly. So I don't think it's a male or a female thing. But what I do find is when you think about the issues that some of my clients are facing regarding lack of understanding their impact or self-doubt or burnout, I do see that to be more prevalent amongst women leaders.
Right.
And I've been reflecting quite a bit on this. It gets to the point, I think everybody can feel that sense building of burnout. I think women are just it takes them a little longer to speak up, or, they have to land in the emergency room thinking they're having a heart attack or have their hair falling out. And these are stories I've actually heard in order to actually reassess and do something about it.
Yeah. I think too, women, because they're always fighting to get to the boardroom, having a seat at the table. And then of course they've got their personal lives. Maybe they're the head of the household. So they've got all this stuff going on. And what happens is that they're still in the fighting mode and they haven't stopped to take the time to self-care themselves.
Right.
Which
I think, Yeah, taking time to stop and reflect is really what I'm all about. I help people sort of peel back. And it's amazing to me when let's say I'm kicking off a 12 session engagement with somebody. It's so interesting at the beginning, the male or female, they feel like, wow, I can't take 90 minutes for myself. How can I turn off my email and my Slack and my cell phone? And this is even when it's corporate sponsored work, that sense of guilt, and being away from mission critical work for 60 or 90 minutes is so interesting to me. And if I reflect honestly about my past, I was somebody who was so scheduled, so effective with my time, but rarely did I build in those breaks. And I found them to be so vital to, again, long-term sustainable success.
Right. Yeah. No, they are key if you want to really have an effective organization. Oh, this is an So, you share maybe some type of situations that you've worked on that you could share without, telling us who they are, but maybe some of the things that you've worked on are from beginning to the end, what happened in the middle.
Sure. Are you more interested in an individual story or a team story?
Whatever you want to share.
Okay. Well, I'll share an impressive individual story to start. And the individual was a high-powered marketing executive at a Fortune 100 brand. And we crossed paths in my past life when we executed a digital education program for thousands of marketers globally. Right. So that was quite an impressive task for this individual to launch pretty much single-handedly. And so, my admiration for this individual is great. She then went on to join a smaller climate, a digital agency, and sort of avoided the red flags that she saw early on in terms of leadership misalignment. Right. The story that she told me upon reflecting on her tough experience was, the CEO didn't believe in emotional intelligence. That alone, I said, okay, not only do they, not that you don't share, you're not seeing eye to eye fully, but they just don't believe that it exists or that it's important, can make it pretty hard to communicate effectively on behalf of your team or for your own well-being. And so what I've worked on with her is helping her find a new journey where she's determined that, swim is important to her, that, volunteering is important. And so now she's found a way to piece together a number of contract type works to find a new normal. And she's thrilled because she's in high demand. She's working on really interesting projects, and that will fuel her to determine the next full-time path. But I'm really glad that she decided to leave a toxic climate after trying for many months to make it work, when clearly, you can't reason with a leader who thinks like that. Yeah. So that's one example.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, because I think, when, as an individual, we have to take responsibility for ourselves and where we're going to go. And if it's not working in that situation, then we need to actually, like you were saying, make a plan to move out or make a plan to adjust ourselves so it can work.
Right.
And if it wasn't able to do that, then exit.
And it's time to go and use it as an opportunity to build a better, more ideal set of circumstances. Yeah. But I think, it's really hard, I think, when we're in the moment, in these high growth, toxic climates where you do start to think, well, it must be me, or this is normal. Right. And I think, unfortunately, in some modern climates, the harder you work, the busier you are, that's celebrated. And I'm hoping that the work that I do can create sort of ripple effects in teams and cultures to recognize that, no, it's okay to take a break. It's okay to lean back a bit if it means that we're getting clearer and more deliberate in how we're doing the work.
Right. Yeah, very good. So what are your favorite type of clients you like to work with?
I love all clients, but I like to say that, of course, I tend to do best with high achievers who have a tenure, a story to tell, and they're either at a point of like reaching to that next level of the rung, or strategically repositioning themselves. So,
Mhm.
somebody may have built their career for 10 years as a sales leader, and they think, maybe I don't want to be a sales leader. Where else can I take these skills? Should I bring them into non-for-profits? Should I, should I help startup founders evolve their business models more quickly? And so that challenge is always really interesting to me.
Mhm.
I also really like helping multiple teams break down those silos, because I think that's just so natural
Mhm.
in work climates, to everybody just put their head down, they get the work done, but without sort of seeing the blue sky around them.
Right.
You have to really think, well, are we achieving the business objectives, and are we focusing our energy in the right areas in order to get that done? And so that when I can break that down in a workshop setting, let's say, and help the teams really figure out their reason of being and their how,
Right.
it's really amazing what follows in the weeks and months later.
Right. Right. So you focus on their how.
Yeah, and I think the how is so important. And even with individuals who are going through something as basic as an interview process, right? I think we're all so caught up on the, the impacts that we've made, and the achievements and the metrics, but somebody next to you can have those same exact metrics, or maybe better metrics. So how are you doing this? What is unique to you
Yes.
as the candidate that you can share in your story that will be intriguing to the company?
Right. Right. Okay. Cool. So, do you want to share any types of tips or hints or anything about what people can do and how they can work with you?
Sure. Well, thanks to you, I will be giving the audience a free download. They're welcome to download a playbook, which is focused on empathy, emotional intelligence, and effective communication in the workplace. It's built for leaders, but really, I don't think you need to be a manager in order to be a
Mhm.
leader in your own organization. So I think any person can benefit from this. And it's, just 5 actionable items that they can introduce into their work climates today, or, just into their own daily practices in terms of mindfulness.
Right.
Um, I think, you know, effective communication is the number one hurdle, surrounding a lot of the work that I do. And
Mhm.
so I think encouraging people to just step back and really dissect objectively what is going on, and relaying their intention, which
Mhm.
is, hey, we want to get from A to B. I'm not.
Okay.
This is not personal, even though they might assume that to be true. People are complex beings, right? And so to have that level of respect, to level set and share with them that, hey, we all have this common goal. Let's rally around that, is so important.
Right.
Um, so to sort of get out of their own head, maybe take the initiative, which is a bit uncomfortable, but to
Mhm.
level set and have that honest conversation, I think is so important, and can really change the way that they show up every day.
Right. Right. Like you're saying, it's the common goal. The common goal of the company is this. So how are we going to achieve it? And then when the personalities are in it, um, so it sounds like you help the personalities as well in that how goal.
Right, to have that mutual respect, and also to recognize that one person's strength isn't the other person's strength. So how can we collectively get there? And I think that's such an important concept, especially for a leader who's building out a team. And back to that old world thinking versus new world, I
Yeah.
think the most progressive leaders recognize that they need to hire people who are smarter than them to
Yeah.
get the job done. And they need to hire people from a diversity of walks of life, of backgrounds, of socioeconomic backgrounds, of race, of sex, right? So
Yeah.
all of that will create, a more well-rounded perspective, and a better likelihood to achieve the goal,
Right.
whatever it is, more effectively.
Right. Right. Yeah. Because you have different cultures and different types of people from different places that they have their different upbringing, right? And they see things that aren't working, and this is how I would fix it. And somebody else say, well, this is how I would fix it, and then they can kind of work together to create that end goal,
Exactly.
whatever that is.
Help. they can help see through each other's lenses in a way, which
Right.
I think is so important, and especially important when you're trying to overcome something like groupthink, which is also another common challenge in workplaces,
Right.
especially those that have tenured people. They might treat their people really well, but in terms of the impact that individuals are having, when you have a really strong leader that everybody sort of files behind, that's where you start to get that sense of, am I contributing? Should I be doing something greater? Am I
Yeah.
respected? Am I making an impact? And those are really hard questions to be asking yourself each day and remain motivated.
Right. Yeah. And the ideas of, how we each contribute, and also that in itself will build up the trust and the cooperation within a team, right? If everybody's listening to each other, right?
Right. It's so
Yeah.
important. It's
Like you were
easier
saying.
said than done, though.
Yeah.
I can expect. But that's where outside support can be helpful, just to really understand what's going on here. I
Yeah.
think, most individuals are well intentioned, right?
Yeah.
I grew up with that school of thought, hey, for the most part, people are doing the best they can. But I think when you add in the climate of fast growth companies, the best they can
Mhm.
sometimes does not leave any room for reflection. And so, sometimes it takes someone like me, or a framework of thinking, to come in and say, oh, all right, well, maybe this isn't the best way, or the best for our long-term sanity or
Yeah.
growth.
Yeah. Or the business growth, wherever the objective is, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Anything, final notes, final things that you would like to say?
I guess, if anybody listening to this podcast is on the other end of the hiring spectrum, right? I do think there's a great opportunity to revolutionize the way that HR, quote unquote, functions operate. And I do think, like I said, hiring managers, they're doing the best they can, but they don't always have the resources.
Yeah.
And my background is not in HR, but I do, I have hired dozens of people and interviewed hundreds of people, and of course help people now navigate the process. And I think creating a process that is that they can be upfront about,
Mhm.
so that candidates going, navigating it, know what to expect. I think it's so important, because that mutual respect can be shown from minute one,
Right.
in terms of someone's interaction with the company. And unfortunately, I'm not seeing a whole lot of that. And I think it's just because everyone's so harried and crazed. But really just being intentional about what type of questions are okay to ask, not okay to ask,
Mhm.
setting expectations. Hey, this is going to be a longer cycle. There are 3 phases of this.
Yeah.
Stick with us, so that people aren't operating in the dark, because then a lot of that doubt comes into play.
Right.
And there's got to be a better way. So
And
my
you
call for
you-
everyone in 2020 is to embrace some transparency in the process, and also some creativity.
yeah.
I recognize, I grew up in SaaS businesses, and I recognize the need to have a certain skill set. But I think, again, the how you do something is equally important. And so if we can give some weight to that,
Mhm.
perhaps not equal footing, but some points there in terms of the how someone's going to do it, to give somebody with grit and determination a chance to break into a new climate without
Right.
having that expertise, is I think will be a welcome change
Right.
in the new decade.
Yeah. So you'd like to see more changes in how the HR hires, and having a process that everybody could follow?
Yes, and also just more openness to the types of candidates, both,
Okay.
again, diversity of experience. I see folks facing ageism or sexism, and, I think that's really a short-sighted view,
Right.
to only be hiring worker bees who are going to just, execute on whatever you say, because the creativity is sucked out of that. It's, again, not
Right.
sustainable. And, I think there just has to be a better way.
Yeah. That's sort of like you're going to end up with high growth, but no middle.
Yeah, exactly. And no joy along the way,
Yeah.
which, we all spend most of our hours, in working climates and in those 4 walls. So, um, how can we make the most of it?
Right. Right.
That's my hope.
Oh, okay. Great. Well, thank you very much for joining on the call today. I really appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule. And if you want to get a hold of Stephanie, you can find her at podcast.heartatworkonline.org. And she'll also be listed on Anchor as well. This is under Impactful Legacy. So yes, I'm sure lots of people want to listen in, tune in, see what Stephanie has to say. And if you want to reach out to her, you can reach out to her there as well. Okay.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. I'm also active on LinkedIn, and it was a delight to be here today. Thank you for your cause, and I'll continue to be a fan.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks so
Thank you,
much.
everybody. And
Have a
don't forget, have a kind day and be kind.